Since 2016, the English have been worried about seeing their millionaires disappear at an alarming rate. Between 2017 and 2023, 15,700 wealthy British residents left to look for greener grass elsewhere, and a mass exodus is expected this year, estimated at 9,500 new departures. Considered for centuries as a global place for business, the United Kingdom is no longer popular with the wealthiest, who prefer the weather and the quality of life of safer and more welcoming countries. It now has a higher rate of flight of the ultra-rich than that of Russia. Originally, of course, Brexit, but not only, since the whole of Europe seems to be facing the same phenomenon. Despite all its efforts, this good old continent seems very dull in the eyes of big fortunes and multinationals, much more mobile than before. Today, they no longer hesitate to change their horizons as soon as the weather spoils, and contrary to the legend circulating in Bercy, it is not only for tax reasons. In this video, I invite you to get to know the so-called super-rich, what drives them to pack their bags and what consequences this could have on Europe, when both are not at their best. And when I start using euphemisms too, it doesn't smell good. A species on the way to appearing in the economic ecosystem, a subspecies has been developing very quickly since the opening of the third millennium, and is spreading rapidly throughout the planet. No, it's not the Asian hornet. Until now, she had mainly settled in North America and Europe, but she quickly gained Asia, whose census scores are getting a little closer every year to those of the old continent. I'm talking about the rich, these men, these women, and these families, from the clans who have a heritage of more than $1 million to Bernard Arnault, who collects billions from him. For example, for all the noise it makes, even if the species is rare, according to Forbes magazine, the world has 2,711 billionaires in 2024 who hold the equivalent of $14,500 billion, or the GDP of France, India, Germany, and the United Kingdom combined. There are also 59.4 million millionaires, including 243,000 sitting on at least $50 million. Together, they represent 0.75% of the world's population. By themselves, these 0.75% of the population who never deny themselves anything have generated as many emissions of polluting or greenhouse gases as the 5 billion poorest human beings. Between the private jets to travel 200 kilometers to get to Davos or to go hunting for the Big Five in Africa, the super yachts that anchor off Monaco for the Grand Prix or Cannes during the festival, the dream cars and their big V12 that emit 3 times more GHGs than my Twingo, the Gabaji of space tourism, we wonder if the rich of the world have integrated the climate emergency correctly. Finally, no one sees with a very good eye their influence on the ruling classes, let alone all the tricks they manipulate to evade taxes, while 1 in 2 people on this planet lives on less than $2,500 a year, or $6.85 a day. But then, with so many flaws, why are governments courting them so much? Everywhere the rich are pampered, and this is particularly visible in France since the election of Emmanuel Macron, but it is a general phenomenon. However, the role of the rich in the economy is a complex and controversial subject. So what is the use of a rich person? First of all, any rich person is a potential investor. His well-invested money supports major business projects, research, or the development of emerging technologies. It helps to create new wealth and promotes the achievement of great discoveries. Then, these companies or his personal activities create jobs, and his expenses benefit other sectors by ripple effect. Not to mention that a rich person is often a philanthropist. His philanthropic foundation finances environmental and social causes, and relieves the states of part of the responsibility in these areas. The rich man and woman also consume a lot. They are, for example, the pillars of the luxury industry, a market worth $1,500 billion in 2023, which should increase to $2,500 billion by 2027. Finally, in theory, as they earn a lot of money, the rich pay a lot of taxes, essential to keep society running and take care of the weakest. Yes, I said it right in theory because in practice we all know that things are very different. They are champions of tax evasion. The concentration of wealth has reached excessive levels and widened inequalities, and their influence on economic policies is disproportionate. Is it necessary, however, to fight them until they disappear, as some people suggest? Why are they leaving, and where are they going? It is security that generally pushes them to change scenery, security for their money, for their property, their business, and their people, and not contrary to a tenacious belief in Emmanuel Macron's governance. The tax burden is not the number one criterion, especially since the rich live in a delusional but perfect world for them, where work is taxed much more than capital. In practice, compared to their income, they pay little personal taxes, and their companies are domiciled in countries where taxation is low. The game of consolidating profits then makes their taxation impossible. It is therefore their safety that counts above all, and this safety is defined in several points. First, by diplomatic stability. The rich do not live under bombs, near front lines, or in an area occupied by an invader of any kind. Then, by social stability. There is no question of exposing one's wealth during a civil war or riots. Then comes economic stability, which guarantees growth, protection of savings, moderate inflation, and therefore increased profits. Finally, a government in place open to all their causes assures them that no regulatory measures targeting their heritage or their activities will darken their azure sky. So they also need political stability. When one of these criteria is no longer met, they leave, heading for Australia, Singapore, the United States, Switzerland, the Emirates, Portugal, or of course Dubai. They find tranquility there, an ideal environment to do business, educate their children, and get access to advanced technologies in the health sector. But chasing the gulls, as some suggest, is not a good idea. As we have seen, they are useful for the smooth running of a country, and history confirms it. When the rich and the very rich run away from a country, life becomes a little harder for those who remain. Lebanon, Cuba, the USSR, Venezuela, Iran, Mao's China, or Greece are excellent examples. The flight of the rich does not contribute to the flourishing of populations or to the economic catch-up of a country in difficulty. Should France prepare for the coming flight of its upper classes? This is a legitimate question when we observe the current signals. With growth limited to 0.9% in 2023 and forecasts of 0.8% for 2024, the economic situation is worrying. Inflation, although down to 2.2% last June, accumulated 12.8% over 3 years. This average hides significant increases, in particular in food products, which saw an increase of 18%, and energy, with electricity up by 44.5% and gas by 42%. Faced with this, an adjustment of wages seems necessary, but it is still necessary that companies have the means to do so. On the employment side, the prospects are also bleak. The promises of the country's reindustrialization are struggling to materialize, and the PMI index remains below the critical threshold of 50, a sign of industrial activity in recession. French industrial production fell by 2.3% in May, one of the worst results in the European Union. The deterioration of our trade balance, even if it improved slightly after the pandemic, remains worrying. The upward trend in the trade deficit, which began in 2003, continues. On the financial front, the public debt, which reaches €3,159.7 billion, continues to grow without bringing the expected benefits in terms of growth or social stability. In 10 years, France has spent almost €500 billion just to repay the interest on this debt, and this trend is likely to worsen in the coming years. This situation explains why the European Union and international investors remain skeptical about the various austerity plans proposed by the government. The political situation does not help anything. The lack of an absolute majority makes it difficult to adopt essential reforms. The risk of a political deadlock is real, with the prospects of increased use of Article 49.3 to pass unpopular laws which could accentuate distrust towards institutions. The current political instability could further weaken France's economic attractiveness, which is already declining. Faced with this context, the possibility of an exodus of the rich becomes a concrete threat. France has 53 billionaires, 3,890 people with fortunes exceeding €50 million, and 2,868 millionaires. In addition, there are 4.7 million people living on at least twice the median income. These upper classes, already heavily taxed, may well decide to leave or place their wealth abroad, especially if the situation continues to deteriorate. For the moment, the number of French expatriates in the world remains stable, around 2.5 million, but this could change quickly. France, where compulsory levies represent 46% of GDP, has long been champion of taxes, which contributes to the exasperation of the wealthiest taxpayers. The flight of the rich could lead to dramatic consequences for the French economy. A significant decrease in domestic consumption and a decline of 10 to 15% in the economic attractiveness of the country in 1 to 2 years are plausible scenarios. This situation would be comparable to a new Greek crisis, but on a French scale, which would be a disaster for the European Union, given the weight of France. To avoid the worst, it is urgent to rethink the French economic and social model. It is not simply a question of retaining the rich, but of creating an environment favorable to investment and innovation, while alleviating the taxation that weighs on work and business. The challenge is to build a dynamic and inclusive economy, capable of benefiting everyone, not just an economic elite. The challenge is complex, but it is crucial for the future of France and Europe, and it seems that the current government is not in a position to meet it. This deep malaise that is going through France is a reflection of a loss of confidence in the future of the country. If the upper classes leave France en masse, the consequences could be catastrophic for an already weakened economy. This is a critical moment for France, and it is more necessary than ever to take care of our country by thoroughly reforming its economic and social model. The next few years will be decisive for the future of France, and the decisions that will be taken could well define the fate of an entire generation.